off by saying congratulations on the film. I've had a chance to watch it and I loved it, so congratulations.
Oh, thank you very much.
So, mate, tell us a little bit about where the idea for this film came about from, because, of course, we know you mostly for your work in the horror genre. And where did the idea for doing a film that's more kind of action come from?
Well, I wrote the original draft of the screenplay way back in 1996 when I was still living in New York City. I'm in Buffalo now. And I was working on another project with a friend, and we were going to do a similar type of sort of weekend war in the woods type of action movie, just because he wasn't a horror guy, and we thought it would be a nice meeting place between our interests. For one reason or another, it ended up not working out. He suggested I write my own attempt at that type of storyline, which I did, and as soon as I wrote it, I knew it was too big for what I was able to do on budgets back then, on micro budgets.
Yep.
And it went into a drawer, as many of my screenplays have over the years, coming out periodically, and I take a look at it, maybe make a few minor adjustments. But it wasn't really until the pandemic that I said this film that was so inconceivable to do on a low budget back then is suddenly the most practical one to do, because 90% of it is set outdoors and we can shoot it safely.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about where it went from there. Like, if this film looks so good, what was it like being able to go back and revisit something you wrote expecting a micro budget but having a little bit more now?
Well, a lot of my projects are that way.
Yeah.
Because, I've been doing this since 1986, and I've written a lot more scripts than I have made movies. And it's not unusual for me to go pull things out of the slush drawer, as we call them.
Yep.
And it was still a micro budget film. I mean, we made it for around $100,000, which is probably about what we would have done it for back in 96. The difference being, of course, the technology is more affordable today, the cameras, and just because of the strange COVID situation, when we announced this film, nobody was shooting. Everyone was still in lockdown.
Yep.
And it's sort of coming out of it. And I think that's why it did well on the crowdfunding campaign. We raised the money through fans, not through investors as I normally would. And there was a general sense of excitement for it. A lot of people wanted to be a part of it, and that's why people volunteered for a lot of the roles or contributed money in exchange for a role, which isn't something I would normally do. But, dire situations require dire solutions, and I just really wanted to make a movie.
Now, there's a lot of young filmmakers that listen to this show, so I was wondering if you could share your advice for just a moment, because when you go through film school, the one thing that you're taught is you can't do action films on a micro budget, but you have done it so well. What would your advice be to young filmmakers out there that are working with a micro budget, but do want to do something like an action film rather than just a drama or a simple horror?
I think the key is always to surround yourself with like-minded people who can do things that you can't do, to shore up your weak spots. And, I hire crew or enlist partners the same way I cast a film. I'm looking for people who can do specific things and do them well and do things that I can't do on my own. And you have to surround yourself with people who want to do the same thing you want to do, or in it for the same reason you are.
Yep.
On a micro budget, if you're going around to professionals, and I've worked with amateurs and professionals and semi-pros, I consider myself a semi-professional. Sometimes I make money on these things and sometimes I don't. You're never going to get professional crew for a low budget, for a micro budget film.
Yep.
Because number one, they're out of your price range, and number two, they're used to being part of a much larger team.
Yep.
So in some ways, I had my previous two films were both around the $250,000 mark, which is still super low budget, but it's enough to pay people to do your film. And this was sort of a step backwards in the sense that it was it was almost a third as much. And although we paid some people, we paid them, peanuts. We did have a lot of volunteers, and we did have some interns, some college students, and what I did with them is I made it a genuine educational experience. I sort of had a curriculum for them for the shoot to make sure they came out of it as fully trained production assistants, which isn't always the case. Sometimes when you work for free on a film, you're just going to get stuck watching the water truck or whatever, and you don't get a lot out of it. I made sure that the few people we had working for free on crew did get real experience, and then at the end of the shoot, I paid them for a few days' work, which they didn't know going into it.
Yeah.
I know that's getting off track, but I mean, don't be discouraged. Don't let people tell you you can't accomplish something. We have a helicopter chase sequence in this film. It's not really elaborate, but it's there. And it was always part of the script, and was always one of the things I didn't want to get rid of, because, that's sort of a trope of the Rambo films that he faces off against a helicopter. And I just happened to meet the guy who's the cinematographer on the film, Chris Cosgrave, who's done visual effects for me on past films. And he works with miniatures. And he had a reel of a 20-year-old film where this 15 toy helicopter was shooting at vehicles in a street, and it looked totally convincing to me. And we used that same helicopter toy in this film. It's not even a remote-controlled helicopter. It was totally a toy shot blue screen.
Yep. Wow. And you mentioned that about using crowdfunding this time instead of investors. Did that in some way give you more control over the film as well?
No, I've generally had full control on my films, but it does alleviate the stress of whether or not those people are going to get their money back. And quite honestly, my previous film was a film called Widow's Point, which starred Craig Sheffer from Nightbreed.
Yep.
And I thought it was pretty good. It was about a haunted lighthouse. But we went with a sales agent, and sales agents sell films at film markets. They travel around the world and sell these things. And they got to go to one film market and made a few sales, and we were encouraged. And then COVID hit.
Yep.
And there were no more film markets for the next year and a half, and the film died.
Yep.
And so, number one, my investors really took a hit. And I couldn't, in all conscience, go back to any of them and say, let's try this one.
Yep.
Because at that point, we didn't know if theaters were reopening. We didn't know if the film markets were reopening. It was just a very incredibly uncertain time.
Yep.
So the crowdfunding seemed to be the only way to go. And, I've done crowdfunding in the past, usually for startup funds. And then once I have the startup funds, I can get some investors. But I've never tried to crowdfund a film entirely before. And it was successful. And I think the reason it was successful, as I said, was just because of the timing. People were chomping at the bit to find a way to work on films again, even if it meant contributing money to go play a role or work on the crew or whatever.
Yep. Now, you're talking about the time period of COVID. You shot during that time. Did that change the way you had to shoot the film at all?
Well, it was a lot of work for my wife, who was a co-producer on the film, as far as tracking everybody's vaccinations. Most of the people were vaccinated. A few weren't. And that was because when I did the crowdfunding campaign, I said that people would have to follow any mandates, and getting vaccinated did not become a mandate.
Yep.
So if people contributed to the film and I promised them a role, they had to get that role,
yep.
whether they were vaccinated or not. And even a couple of people who were in my of the 10 main roles, even a couple of people who fit in there, they weren't vaccinated.
Yeah.
But because most of their scenes were outdoors, it wasn't a big concern. Now, I'd been obviously following very closely what the rules were in my state, New York State, and what the protocols were and how other people were dealing with it. And for a non-union film, what was basically required was testing. Testing. On a union film, I think it's every 3 days now, but we were able to test every week. And as it turned out, we actually postponed shooting 1 month because the vaccinations were becoming more common. And I just felt that if we waited a month, it would be better for us in the long run. So more people were able to get vaccinated, and we were coming out of it, and it felt pretty good at the time. I mean, we still wore masks the few times that we were indoors, but outdoors, most of us did not wear masks. Some people did.
Yep.
And then, like in the last week of shooting, the numbers started ticking up again, and I feel like we just, by luck, shot in the right window.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you talked about the cast. How did you go about casting the film other than the crowdfunding people? How did you go with casting this film? Did you have people in mind when you went back over the scripts and did the rewrite?
So, there's the famous saying that 90% of directing is casting. I don't really believe that, but I do think it's a big part of it.
Yep.
And the only reason that I went with the, pay for a role type of crowdfunding was because in this film we have these different militia groups, sort of different gangs and the warriors. And in the script, I didn't assign personalities to any of those characters.
Yep.
So I knew that for those roles, I could certainly create personalities around people that I knew who got the roles or people that I got to know. So I knew that in those small roles, it couldn't hurt the film. In terms of the larger roles, I would definitely not do that. We knew that the lead actress, who we went with, a woman named Alexandra Faye-Sadagian, which is a mouthful. She's a New York City actress. That was the key role that was going to carry the whole film. And so my wife and I, we actually asked other filmmakers for some recommendations, and that's how we came across Alexandra. But I felt that the whole film hinged on having the right person for that character.
Yep.
Most of the other people that are in the supporting roles, other than Lynn Lowry, they are local people that I know from the Buffalo film and theater scene. Some were untested to me, and some I knew were very capable. Peter Johnson, who plays Jeremy, who's her police officer partner, who convinces her to go on this camping trip. He's done a lot of work, and he's a casting director. So I knew that having two professional actors in those parts would save me a lot of time on set, because they would do what any professional actor would do and work together on their own time and develop chemistry, and that's exactly what happened.
Well, mate, you've ended up with an absolutely fantastic film, so I guess the best way to wrap up the interview is to ask, what would you like to say to everybody out there who's about to sit down and watch this film?
I just hope you enjoy it. I am a horror guy. I do work in different genres when I can. There's a fantasy western out right now traveling around the film festival circuit called Showdown in Yesteryear, which I wrote. When you do a horror film, you're getting one sort of audience. And when you do an action film, you may be getting a completely different audience. So that's really what the big difference is for me, is the difference in people who are going to be watching it. Yep. So I just hope people like it. I mean, that's all you can do, is put it out there and hope people like it.